My son was pitching in a baseball game, and he didn't pitch good. I said to myself, you know what? Should I put on my little therapist hat and ask him how he's feeling? Maybe I'll put on my baseball cap, and I'll help him with his follow-through. Well, I walked into that dugout with those other kids, and he said to me, Dad, I need a hug.
Be Inspired podcast. Real stories from real people. Sharing stories of love and loss, struggles and perseverance, laughter and tears, and overcoming adversity.
So much of what happens to children paves the road to adulthood for them. Our guest this time around on Be Inspired is a family dynamics expert, best-selling author, and in-demand keynote speaker to talk about the concept of childhood messages. Hi, I'm Burt Barron.
And I'm Lisa Anderson.
And we welcome you in to Be Inspired. Lisa, so many things, experiences, exposures of things that happen to young people. Think of it as just a ball of clay that models the type of adult they're going to be, and you have to be so attentive to children and get those messages that they're sending to their parents and those who are responsible for them.
Yeah, years ago, I think our parents were, we were fed and then we went outside to play. And there really wasn't a lot of emphasis put on molding us as much as there is today.
Our guest who's with us here on Be Inspired is a family dynamics expert. He's a best-selling author, an in-demand keynote speaker. You've probably seen him on television, heard him on satellite radio, but it's great to welcome Thomas Gagliano to Be Inspired. Thomas, welcome. It's great to have you with us here today.
Thank you for having me. Truly appreciate it.
Let's start with your story, Thomas, and your childhood and your upbringing. Share some experiences, if you would.
Well, I didn't come from what you'd call a great childhood. I came from an alcoholic, abusive dad that unfortunately when he came home at a certain hour, it meant he was either going to hurt someone or he was going to go to sleep. So I was like that kid that stood at the top of the stairs, really scared, ready to pull him off my mom. And my mom was a kid herself when I was born. So why do I always talk about my experiences? It's really important to understand that when a child feels like they don't matter to their parents, it's not their parents they stop loving. It's themselves they stop loving. Those messages early on will release a tsunami of negative thoughts and actions throughout that little kid's life. It'll affect the intimacy they have or don't have, their parenting skills, every choice they make. So about 20 years ago, I decided to move away from the world of business, and I decided to help others that suffered as I had from negative childhood messages. And I also wanted to give my children the positive and healthy messages that were denied to me as a kid. So I moved away from the world of business and I started groups, and that's what I do today, helping couples and groups get through some negative childhood messages because the impact those messages have can never be understated.
Tom, it always surprises me how some folks who grow up in an abusive household, and I'm sorry that you went through that in your childhood, but it can either turn them really bitter or it can make them, when I met you, the first minute I met you and we started talking about bagels or whatever we were talking about, you were instantly engaging and warm and welcoming, and that's where you went the other way. You were aware of what you went through.
You're looking at me today.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, as a kid, there was nobody more angry than I was. I was in trouble, in fights. You see, what happens when you receive negative childhood messages, you become fragmented early on. You stop trusting people for your emotional needs. And that is where addiction comes in. Destructive actions come in, or acting in with depression, isolation. See, you become fragmented. You become two people. One mask you show the world. It could be a mask of success. It could be a lot of different masks. But underneath, there's a part where you feel defective, you feel unworthy, you feel ugly. Because if your parents don't love you, who would? So you hide that part of yourself, like I did, until I got into 12-step rooms, until I got into recovery and therapy, until I was able to become more congruent and bring that inside out. That's what I do with clients. They come in wrecked, destroyed. sabotaging their relationship. Because when you come from a childhood where you're not looking at your parents modeling in a healthy way, when your parents are running away, screaming at each other, shutting down, running to addiction, you have no modeling for what true emotional intimacy is. You can only go by what you see. And you become an emotional cripple. What I do in my groups is I help people become congruent, where they can challenge those messages as being myths and false. And I call it put on your big girl, big boy shoes on and show up like an adult. Learning how to communicate and share your feelings. Learning how to put boundaries down when you're abused. All of these things are what I do in my group. We role play, we do these things because when you come from a negative childhood, you don't know how to do this. But what you do know how to do is isolate. See, isolation becomes a very comfortable but toxic place to be.
I could just imagine obstacles for you, Thomas, when it came to just simple relationship building, trust issues, whether it was clergy, sports coaches, teachers. When you can't put any faith or trust in your own family at home, how did it be just very difficult to build any sort of relationship or rapport just simply with neighborhood friends? That had to be a real challenge for you.
You nailed it. It's control and trust. When you come from a troubled childhood, you don't trust any process you can't control. Now you grow older and you're sabotaging everything and you're told, hey, trust this process cause recovery. Trust your therapist, trust your sponsor. And you're like, whoa, no way. That gave me negative actions or negative perceptions, negative stories when I was a kid. So what I do is I try to get people to trust a process that they can't control. But it's very scary for them to give over control because as a child, when you did that, bad things happened. So that's one of the keys I tell my new clients is you're going to fight this. You're not going to fight this because you don't want to get better. You're going to fight this because you learn not to trust anybody in your life. But the key is to learn to trust again.
Tom, you mentioned your dad being abusive and an alcoholic, and he would, attack your mom physically, verbally. Your mom, did you feel protective of her and feel a sense of, I have to protect my mom, or was she also like your dad was? Because children protect.
She was very problematic. A parent's job is to always protect their children, but my mother was she would take me to hotels to catch my father with other women because she was hurting so much. She wanted to hurt him. We talk about this all the time. Hurting people hurt people. We see it in society all the time. Hurting people hurt people. And I was a hurting person. And I really wanted to hurt everybody. I was drinking out a lot of poison and hoping other people died. Didn't work. I couldn't fix the world. I had to fix myself. But that's what happens when you really have a lot of anger inside and you're really hurt inside. You really don't really allow others to help you because you just want to hurt because you're hurting. And that's really what I see in clients that come through the door until they learn to trust the process. Look, the cemetery is built with a lot of people that thought they could control their addiction. It's a very sad comment, but very true. And that's the piece of control that has to be surrendered.
I look at a situation that a child today, Thomas, might be going through with social media and so much peer pressure out there and so many other things, where someone might express having a problem at home on some sort of virtual platform, which oftentimes I could just see that completely backfiring, unfortunately, on a young person. Just the pressures generated by the digital technology we have today has got to be just so tough on a young person.
Yeah, many of us are getting addicted, the endorphins, just to hear the tweet sound, the computers, the messages. There's, I forget the name of it, but there's kids today getting plastic surgery to just look better on their selfies. There's a lot of addictions going on with social media, with cameras, with looks today. And plus, one of the things that we have is, I never mentioned egocentricity. What does egocentricity mean? It's a very important point. Egocentricity means the world revolves around me. As a young child, they only think the world revolves around them. When their parents do something wrong, they think it's something that they did, like they didn't matter. You know, I always used to say, at 5 years old, my son used to say, "What are you getting me for Father's Day, Dad?" And I mean, egocentricity. The world revolves around them. It's important to understand how a child thinks, because when parents are working all the time, trying to build a better home, better college, and doing all the right things, a child may not see it that way. A child may say, "Why aren't you paying enough attention to me? What's wrong with me?" So what I tell parents, because I do speaking on this, is be curious with your children. Keep asking them questions. Don't assume you know how they think or what their behaviors are. Don't assume. Ask the questions. You might be surprised.
Tom, you mentioned that you embarked on therapy and to look within yourself. Tell us what that was like.
Well, in the beginning, I didn't trust my therapist. I would lie to him. I mean, it sounds crazy. Anybody that has a normal sense of being, why would you go to a therapist and pay a therapist and lie to a therapist? I didn't trust anybody, anyone. I had to make that breakthrough to understand that they were not all my father. You know, there's a thing I call time traveling. Time traveling is when we allow the people in our present to become our parents in the past. They could be as different from our parents as can possibly be. But when our emotions are awakened, when we feel those emotions, we time travel back to doing things we would do because we don't want to feel rejected. We don't want to feel unloved. We don't want to feel like if we make a mistake, we are a mistake. And we will do things back to being 10 years old. We'll do the same actions we did when we did 10 years old. Why? To stay in survival mode. So even when it comes to therapists in these other areas, we may lie, and it doesn't make sense unless you understand what time traveling is.
Thomas, when you look at so many homes nowadays, households, there's single parents, there's homes where both parents are working. Just something about that family dynamic has changed so much over the years. The days of the stay-at-home mom just seem like they don't exist anymore. Negative impacts that this has on families today. It's something all sorts of families, and now when you have multiple generations of families all living together under one roof, kind of creates it's sort of an environment for conflict at times.
Absolutely,
right?
And you have media. You can go on gambling, you can go on porn, you can go on spending addictions. It's a haven for addictions. And what parents have to remember is to talk to their children. It's not so much quantity time, it's quality time. Talk to your children. Ask them, how was your day? Good day, bad day? What's going on? Validate their feelings. I will tell you a very important point. A child that feels like their feelings aren't validated will feel like they're not validated. And already you're creating that negative sense of self that will move right into their adult life, especially when they're in intimate relationships.
Sometimes all you need is validation from someone.
A hug.
And it's a huge game changer. But I want to get back something you said about family dynamics, Bert. Did you ever notice when you go or families get together for the holidays, they even make jokes about it? You know, who's going to throw the turkey off the table flying? And did you ever notice that families sometimes get together and there's a lot of dysfunction, not only between, and sometimes I'll feel like I'm 12 again if my sister and I get into a little bit of a tiff.
We go
or
back
my
to
mother.
that family of
You
origin.
do. But what is it that causes so many families to just kind of feel like defensive around maybe a Thanksgiving dinner table and everybody's like, for the most part, I mean, but there's still that sometimes those odd feelings and everybody.
We all go back to the roles we played in childhood. How many people play people pleaser role where they can't say no to their family of origin, even if it hurts their lives? Caretakers, invisible. We all go back to these roles. I wanted to touch on something very interesting, if I can, a quick story about my son, where he taught me. My son was pitching in a baseball game, and he didn't pitch good. He was the starter, the hero, and he pitched horrible. And I was walking in the dugout, wanting to talk to him about how he pitched, and I said to myself, you know what? Should I put on my little therapist hat and ask him how he's feeling? Maybe I'll put on my baseball cap and I'll help him with his follow through. Well, I walked into that dugout with those other kids, and he said to me, Dad, I need a hug. He didn't need a therapist. He didn't need a pitching coach. He needed a hug. So many times when we see our children struggling in whatever areas they're struggling in, I tell parents, stop for a minute. think about what you would have wanted to hear from your mom or dad at that age. Let that compassion guide what you say and the way you say it. Because we go into so many times trying to fix them, trying to cultivate them, trying to steer them in the right direction. And man, let me tell you, sometimes they just need that hug. And he taught me a good lesson that day.
Simple.
Simple
When we
lesson.
come back on Be Inspired, we'll spend some more time with our guest, Thomas Gagliano. We'll talk about some of his best-selling writing and also some information about where you could get some therapy and get some of the learning items from Tom, including his multiple online platforms and how you could have him address your group as well. We'll cover all that and much more with Thomas Gagliano next on Be Inspired.
Moving is difficult. At Lowe's, it doesn't have to be. For all of your residential and commercial moving needs, contact 732-775-4118 or get a free FaceTime estimate. Lowe's, proudly serving New Jersey for over 96 years. IgA Nephropathy Foundation of America is a patient-centric organization dedicated to finding a cure and better treatment options for IgA kidney disease. If you or someone you know was recently diagnosed or to donate, please visit IGAN.org. In this new day and age of online meetings and presentations, you need the best team at the ready. Whether broadcasting your Zoom meetings to Facebook Live or live streaming a fundraiser event, Surreal Streaming Services, with over 10 years of experience, can add confidence to your next live stream event. Call or text 646-498-8888 or visit sur-real.com. Feeling stuck with your health goals? Michelle Weber Integrated Fitness and Lifestyle Design specializes in integrating simple daily routines to get you moving towards strengthening your core and boosting immunity and resiliency. With over 15 years experience, let Michelle's team help you reach your fitness and lifestyle goals by visiting michelleweber.com or on Facebook at Michelle Weber Lifestyle.
Welcome back to Be Inspired. Our guest is family dynamics expert, best-selling author, and in-demand keynote speaker Thomas Gagliano here this time around in our episode of the show. Thomas, so much has been learned and just great information that you share in some of your writings, including your best-selling book, The Problem Was Me. That title alone screams just volumes to me, but talk about the writing process for you and what you hope to achieve with your books.
By the way, my wife loved that title. She said, "You finally got it right." I said, "Thank you, honey. Appreciate that." So when everything for me early on was in my 12-step recovery, you know, they saved my life, and I really changed because my wife and kids left me early on. There's nothing like a good consequence that's going to get you to change. And when I was in the 12-step fellowship and I was talking in these meetings and as a keynote speaker in the 12 steps and stuff, they suggested I write a book. Some of my buddies, and I wrote just this book, and I met a Dr. Abraham Twersky, very renowned author, and he just helped me put it through, and that's how that all happened. And then they told me to go back to school. I did not like that, Bert, at all. I hated school, but they said, you know, you need more of a podium, you need to... And I remember the day I went back to school, I walked out on my front step, and you remember, this 30 years later, okay? And I had my little loose leaf book with my pen. Here's my head, right? I'm looking up and I'm saying, I hope you're getting a kick out of this, God. You know, this is, you know, I got my cup of coffee, my water. Boy, was I in for a surprise. But I helped a lot of people that were also going for that course, and some sponsees, if you will. And they really helped maneuver me through the computer world that I was a dinosaur in. And that's how I went back to school, and that's how that happened.
You know, Tom, you're talking about your kids' feelings and talk to them about it. There is also the other end where we call them helicopter parents, where everything has to be validated. And if they don't win something, you know, the
Trophies
world...
for everybody, yeah.
It's just, so I think maybe in that sense, you know, we lost a game. We went home, we took a shower, we went to bed. But now it's almost as if kids aren't allowed to feel the hurt or to feel disappointment. And I really feel that's a setup for disaster
Failure.
when you get older.
It is. Look, everybody has to learn to fail.
Yeah.
Not be comfortable in failing,
Right.
but I don't know if there's anybody here that never failed at something. We all do. Right? I mean, we all do.
More than
So we
once.
have to teach our children how to dust it off and come back. Now, if we don't teach our children that, if we're not allowing them to get out of their own messes at times, figure out coping mechanisms,
Right.
they're going to get old enough that they're going to hit the world, and all of a sudden, guess who they're going to be mad at? The parent that jumped in all the time. I can't tell you how many parents will come to me. I don't understand why he's so mad at me or she's so mad at me. I was always pulling them out of everything. That's why they're mad at you, because they can't handle life. So you have to learn how to fail, not be comfortable in failing, but you have to learn how to fail, because when you get out there, mom and dad aren't going to treat you the way the world's going to treat you. I mean, the world's going to treat you as mom and dad are going to treat you.
For
Right?
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So many different addictions that are out there, Thomas, and in your work, and you've helped out so many people, whether it's the traditional things, alcohol, drugs and whatnot, internet addiction. You mentioned the gambling addiction, and that one to me is of particular terror, because my observations of people that have gambling addictions, you would never know until their house is going to foreclose and they have no money. And that's what I think makes that one particularly dangerous. You've probably seen that in your years of helping people.
The leading rate of suicides in all addictions is gambling addiction. So it really is, but it's important to understand that addictions that aren't the problem. They're not. They're the symptoms. The problem is the brokenness inside. That's the problem. Because if you help somebody stop gambling and they're not working on what's broken inside, we go back to childhood messages, we go back to fragmentation, we go back to egocentricity, they'll switch seats on the Titanic. They'll start drinking or start drugging or start, doing other sexual things that is going to sabotage their lives. So that's why, for me, I don't just zone in on the addiction, which sobriety has to happen, there's no doubt, but what is the brokenness inside that has to be fixed, that has to be mended? Because if you don't do that, they'll find another escape, because addicts do not know how to regulate their discomfort. They don't. In fact, anybody with really bad acting out behaviors, domestic violence, addiction, whatever, they don't know how to regulate their discomfort. They were never shown that as children. So when they're discomforted or when they're in conflict, they only know one thing. Let me go medicate it with addiction. It's called I call it destructive entitlement. And that's why I zone in on what's broken inside, to really give them a different perception of the world that they've always grown up with and looked at, because that's the healing process.
Tom, there are adults who continue to blame their childhood for everything. Then there are adults that, despite their childhood, have grown to be successful, compassionate people. At what point does someone stop blaming their parents or their childhood, or reverting back to, well, it was because my father or mother was an alcoholic, it was because I was beaten as a child? When do they start taking some responsibility for having success?
Usually when they're losing something they have or not getting something they want. I call it victim mentality.
Yeah.
I blamed everybody and their brother for everything that happened to me. And life wasn't fair. I am not the cause of what happened to me as a child, but I have to take responsibility for fixing that. So if I look at only the cause and not the responsibility, look, I have my own opinion on things. I was abused in every way you could be abused as a kid. And I had the victim mentality. And you know what? Life's not fair sometimes. I think we could become a victim by our gender, by the color of our skin. I think our sexuality. It's not fair. Life's not fair sometimes. Now, I could sit in that victim place and drink poison down and hope the world changes. Or I could turn around and take responsibility. Again, I'm not responsible for what happened to me as a child, but I'm responsible for healing. Or else, I am going to leave dead bodies around in my adult life. I'm going to hurt everybody around me in my adult life if I don't work on the problem was me.
Providing you have the proper therapy and help, correct?
True, but I have to take the first step.
Yeah.
I have to get my feet there. And I could tell everybody listening to this, nobody wants to get help when they come from a tough childhood. You don't feel like walking in and tell people your stories because you don't trust again. So I would tell everybody out there, don't wait till you feel like doing it. You may never feel like doing it. You have to take that leap of faith, take that first step. And if you can take that first step, the next step might come a little easier. But you're not going to feel like getting help when everybody in the world in your childhood has betrayed you. You're not going to trust that process. So you have to do what you don't feel like doing at times in order to get better. Because isolation can be very comfortable, yet very toxic.
Thomas, unfortunately, I'm expecting at the end, however it's going to end, of this coronavirus pandemic, an avalanche of failed relationships, stories of horrific abuse, addiction that is just off the charts at levels we've never seen before. You have the same feeling that isolating people we're just going to start, the checks are being written now and they're going to be cashed as time goes on?
Without a doubt. When uncomfortability starts to awaken in people, addicts, domestic violence, all these things, it's like on steroids, and it gets worse. That's why I'm doing Instagrams. I do them on Wednesday, and what I'm trying to do is get people to rethink their conversations, learn how to move away, learn how to trust those healers in your life. Try to do these things because everything is much, much worse. Overdoses, addictions, domestic violence, these things are like catapulting all over the place. And it's really important for some of us, at least, to learn different tools on how to cope with these things, especially if they're bringing these horrors into their family and they're isolated. So yeah, it's a bad deal.
We should be proud he's doing Instagram now when you didn't even have a computer in the beginning.
And that's some of the positives. You're absolutely right.
There you go.
There's some of the positives. Yeah.
Tom, when a couple comes to you for themselves, for couples counseling, do you think that you can tell whether or not this is a futile attempt or whether or not somebody's going to try? And how does that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I ask a simple question. I take both partners and I say, listen, what could you do to make the relationship better? And then I go to the other one and say, what could you do to make the relationship better? And if they can't answer that, I kind of give them a little surprise. I go, well, we got to stop. What do you mean we got to stop? What do you mean? Well, if you can't think of one thing that can make the relationship better, all you're doing is zoning in on him or her.
Yeah.
And I go the opposite way. So I get them to think about a little bit about how they're showing up in the relationship. And what I find that's funny is they'll always give me different stories. We all have different stories, but at the end of the day, what does everybody want? They want to be a priority to people they love. And at the end of the day, we have different stories that camouflage that. But at the end of the day, if a couple really makes the other one a priority, and that means takes actions, not words, actions to show them they're a priority, we're going to have good couple sessions after that.
Yeah. That's true.
And I hope the dialogue continues, Thomas, because it's unfortunately that something, whether it's a suicide or something has to happen to a very high-profile person, when all of a sudden then depression and mental illness, everybody talks about it, everybody weighs in on it, everybody has an opinion on it. What can we do to just make that dialogue constant? Because it doesn't go away. It doesn't wait to claim the life of a famous person. We got to keep that dialogue out there and keep it top of mind for so many people. And I know it just... People have so many other things to focus on, but it's such an important thing that we've lost way too many good people to.
It's a sad thing to say, but people really don't get better when they need to. They get better when they want to. And that's the tough piece here, is there's a lot of people out there that really need to get better, that they're hurting the people they love the most. But that doesn't happen until they want to. And if they want to, then they'll take direction on some of the tools I can give them. But the one thing I can't supply is the willingness to want to get better. They need to want to. And I think the first thing in conversations is always to validate the other person's feelings. You don't have to agree with what they say, but at least give them the message that you hear them. The healthiest couples that come to me are the ones that have taken direction and have learned how to get through conflict, okay? Because we all have it, right? We all have it. So if I could learn how to get through conflict, through validation, through sharing my feelings, validating another person's feelings, and putting boundaries down, because I'm not going to get yelled at or abused if I'm sharing my feelings. And if that's what you're going to do, we're going to stop the conversation. But if they could follow a simple format on how to have conversations, which is really the key to any relationship, I know they're in a good place.
You know, Tom, it's known that you really cannot be in a successful or loving, healthy relationship unless you love yourself.
Oh, yeah.
How do you teach, I guess, these kids or couples that they have to love themselves? Because if you don't, you're always going to be lashing out at the other one. Look at me, I'm hurting. You know, why aren't you helping me? But when in actuality, we have to learn.
Great
within.
question. I tell everybody all the time, you're the common denominator in all your relationships and the key ingredient to happiness. So when I have a lot of women will come to me and say, listen, we got to get my husband into a marriage session. I go, no, we don't. You have to work on you. Show up as a healthy person. That's the best way to get our spouse, believe it or not, to get help is when they say, what's going on here? You're really not taking my garbage here. You're really showing up like a healthy person. What's going on here? You know, so I always focus in on what was the messages you received on childhood that set up the role you're playing today. Are you the people pleaser role? Are you trying to fix your husband's problems more than they're trying to fix their problems? What is going on with you in this relationship schema that is creating a problem? So let's focus in on you. And many times I'll have them begin individual counseling way before they want to do the couples counseling, which is what they want to do. Fix them, fix them, fix her. Well, it doesn't work like that. It's fixing you and healing what's broken inside of you so you can show up like a big girl, big boy, and put on your big girl, big boy shoes on. And that's really the beginning of changing the schema, because the glove doesn't fit as well when you take care of yourself and you work on yourself.
True.
Of particular difficulty it is for a couple or parents that are having a tough time. I can't imagine what it's like for kids in a household like that, Thomas. A lot of my friends grew up in single-parent households, and I was lucky to have a mom and a dad my entire upbringing. It's got to be so tough on kids. And obviously there's impact, there's scars. Some people deal with it better than others do. What are some factors as to why some kids just seem like they got this and other kids just seem like they never quite kind of gain any traction as an adult?
It's the messages from the parents. First of all, you know, we see the percentage of kids that grow up in a fatherless relationship or relationship with the father being, you know, not healthy like I did. And the odds of them getting in trouble, the odds of them not going to school, the odds of them going into addiction are greatly enhanced. So we that's a statistic, we know that. But here's what's really important. You can have a one-parent family, but what happens sometimes is if the parent isn't, we go back to self-care, if the parent's not nurturing themselves physically and emotionally, spiritually, and everything, all of a sudden the child feels like they got to fill that void. Now the child's not a child no more. They're being parentified. They're taking care of some of the things that they shouldn't have to take care of. And already you're creating a problem as the child grows up. So one of the things is the parent's message, even a single parent, that gives the message that you're a child. You're not supposed to take care of me. It's okay, and nurtures the child and makes the child feel that they're loved unconditionally. Again, don't put your crap in your kid's diaper. Not giving the messages and not putting the fears, the expectations, and all the negative messages into your kid's diaper, because that's going to have a profound effect when they grow into adulthood, especially when they go into intimate relationships.
Yeah.
Thomas, we're almost out of time. I want to thank you for joining us here today, but I also want to get all of your information out there because you offer a lot of things. The Instagram sessions, how can people take part in those?
My Instagrams are The Problem Was Me. I'm on Wednesday at 8 o'clock, and I use different subjects to talk about every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. You can join me on my Instagram. And my podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts, if you put in The Problem Was Me in the search bar, you can flip. I have 24 20-minute podcasts. I talk about a lot of different things. So
YouTube channel and website, people can
and
find
my
you there?
YouTube channel is Thomas Gagliano. Thank you for asking me, because I always mix everything up, and I'm always getting feedback from my medical assistant. No, you got them reversed. So the YouTube is Thomas Gagliano.
Okay,
So,
and people can contact you to come out and lecture and speak as a keynote speaker?
Thank you. My website is theproblemwasme.com. And I have some interesting, some serious radio, TD Jakes, I suppose, some stuff on there that I think people might find a little interesting and helpful. And you know, Bert, when I always talk, wherever I talk, I always say to the audience, take out what you can use. You don't have to agree with everything I'm saying here. If you could take a few nuggets out that'll help your life, take them out with you, use them, and better your life. You don't have to agree with everything I'm saying. So I just always finish that way.
And lastly, Thomas, your books. How can someone get a hold of your books?
Thank you. You could go to Amazon.com or my website. You can pick up the books there.
Sounds good. Thomas Gagliano, thank you for joining us on Be Inspired.
Yeah, awesome.
I'm Bert Barron.
And I'm Lisa Anderson. I need a therapy session.
And thank you for joining us on Be Inspired.
Right away. I'm going to call you, Tom, because that was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, hi, my name is Tom Gagliano again. I have a master's degree in social work. I'm a keynote speaker. Why I did this today is I believe there's a lot of people that need to take that first step, that really are afraid, unsure, distrustful. And I hope a few people that are listening to this can understand that there is a better way out there. It's scary, uncomfortable conversations are not easy ones, but maybe you can take this with you and take that vital first step and really better your life and maybe change the roles you were set up to play.
Next on Be Inspired.
Particularly when I realized how quickly life could be wiped out, and the fact that my brother and everybody I know were going off to war. Some of them didn't come back. I can't tell you how many people he gave a better life to. And when he gave him a house, he says, the only reason you got it is because of your character.
You've opened up your doors, Ruth, to mothers whose children are struggling with addiction. You've opened your doors to mothers who have lost their children.
If people would realize in their life, if you want something out of life, you got to give a lot. And then that thing you get back from other people is so incredible.
Be Inspired with your hosts Bert Barron and Lisa Anderson Puleo. Directed by Rod Weber. Created and produced by Michael R. Doyle. Co-producers Bert Barron, Lisa Anderson Puleo, and Erwin Sternberg. Executive producers Rod Weber and Sean M. Sternberg. Editor Rebecca Gruber. Social media team Rebecca Gruber, John Franklin, and Luke Lograno. Filmed at New Beginnings Foundation, Wall Township, New Jersey. And thanks to our sponsors, Loews Moving Service, IgA Nephropathy Foundation of America, Michelle Weber Wellness, and Surreal Stream Services. Season 4 of Be Inspired is dedicated to the memory of Rob Isbicki, a guest of Season 2, who lost his life to cancer, and to his service to the community as a firefighter. Rob was a proud husband and loving father who cared deeply for his family and friends. Our prayers are with Rob's family during this time.